You mentioned something so important. Most of what I do is realign to the fundamentals. Organizations have inertia, right? They exist for long periods of time. Habits are developed. We do it because we do it. Sometimes an outsider, again, it doesn't have to be me, but an outside voice can say, hey, why are we doing that? What drives value? You mentioned revenue. Let me offer you this. Many organizations, revenue and profit drive value. And
Yeah.
those things are at odds. And that's a natural tension, right? Top line revenue versus profitability. Well, how do we reconcile that? And there might be other metrics that drive value. EBITDA versus gross profit as a percentage or a raw dollar. I know these things sound minor, but they're not. What really are the value drivers in an enterprise, and how are we aligned to deliver those value drivers over what period of time? That's what folks like me hopefully can be helpful with.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Grow IT Podcast. Your host here, Alessandro Cutri, joined today by none other than Michael Brainard. We'll be diving into his story, a little bit about what their company, Brainerd Strategy, is doing, and some special insights into how to build relationships with your ideal client profile. So make sure to stick around. This one's going to be a fun one. But without further ado, man, I'll kind of just pass it on over to you, Michael. If you don't mind just introducing yourself, telling the audience a little bit about your background, and then what led you to, start Brainerd Strategy.
First of all, thanks for having me, Alessandro. I really
Of
appreciate
course.
being on the podcast and sharing some ideas. So a little bit about me. I after I went to college at the University of Delaware, I kind of took a left turn or right turn and went off into a professional boxing career for a couple of years. Didn't work out, obviously. Was looking around to see what I was going to do next, and I decided that academics were where I was going to land. So I got a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. Without that, the reason I mention that is without that, I didn't know this field existed, this field that I currently work in, which is broadly considered management consulting, but I'm more the people process guy. So IO psychologists study things like selection techniques, leadership development, organizational development, change management, team development. So we're the people and process type of folks. So went into large consulting, went into student loan company and took another left turn and did some corporate development and strategy.
Yeah.
Went off and started Brainerd Strategy in 2006, and here I am.
There we go, man. So what was it that like, I guess, because obviously you did a couple things, but then you went to start your own company. What was the inspiration behind that to, pave your own path?
Relationships. The primary answer to that question is relationships. I was at a large HR consulting firm that went through a change of control, change of ownership, and that was an obvious point for me to jump off and take a risk. The reason I felt comfortable taking that risk is I had been working in this HR consulting firm for a number of years, and I knew many of the buyers, HR executives, CEOs in my local market, which was Southern California primarily. So by the strength of my relationships, I developed the confidence to be able to go out and generate business, and frankly, interesting business and slightly different business than I had been doing at the large firm.
And, obviously there's like a lot of, management consultants out there. There's a lot of, different people that, will say they're management consultants, right? But I'm curious, obviously you've been in this space for a while now. You've gotten your hands dirty with, numerous of projects. Like, what would you say is kind of your unique value proposition that you guys kind of bring to the table as a management consulting firm?
So it's interesting, right? Let's go backwards. So the term management consultant, some people would look at a guy like me and say, that's not really a management consultant. The management consultant is really an IT or a finance consultant or somebody at KPMG who does tax. Management consultants. My unique value proposition in our firms is we deeply understand people, leadership specifically. So we get retained. Our value proposition is to come in and look at either a team or an individual executive who is in their current state at X, and the organization would like to get them to Y because they need to develop that team, because it's mission critical to the strategy, or because that executive needs to be developed for their succession in their business. It's very specialized. There are many executive coaches. Almost every former executive hangs a shingle and says they're executive coach. But there's a deep understanding of three things that has to occur to be a true team and executive coach. Psychological principles at a deep level, business principles at a deep level, and strategy at a pretty deep level. When you can pull those things together, I can now sit down with a high functioning executive or executive team or leadership team at any place in the organization and
Yeah.
understand the dynamics between those individuals, or in this case, the dynamics in the case of an individual, get to know that current state and help them get to a different state.
Yeah, and I think it might help if you could share like an example. Obviously, you don't have to name any names if you don't feel comfortable, but of a company that maybe you've worked with in the past and maybe some people that executives that you were able to help and kind of the transformation they were able to see.
So this is easy because this is what I'm going to do after this podcast and what I was doing before this podcast. So
Uh-huh.
let me tell you a typical story, but a powerful story. So CEO who I worked with in the past comes into new company. New company executive team is getting together for the very first time in January to clarify its objectives and goals for the upcoming year. I interview the members of the team, and here's how the interview goes basically. Yeah, I'm clear on our goals. No, we don't have any goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my goals, but I don't understand how they interact with others. This is a team of about a dozen people. You can't get that kind of variety, right? That's not functional. So I design an agenda, the CEO approves it, I come in and I say, well, here's what I understand the current state to be, and the room erupts, literally erupts. The CFO had presented these goals to the board and gotten buy-in. Literally, one other human had seen a draft of those goals at all prior to this meeting.
Huh.
So really well-intended smart leaders are pulling ropes in different directions, not at all aligned on what they ought to do. And now it's already the end of January, and now it's an 11-month year to perform against key goals that the board has seen, but the management team has not even not seen. Now we got to get alignment. Now we got to align incentives. Now we got to make sure our organizational design and structure is right to deliver on those goals. Or we have to go back and change those goals. So now I work with the team over the course of the next 30 days to get buy-in and alignment and clarity around the goals, the KPIs, the metrics, and the processes to go forward. Then it's another 3 months because we realize the organization is not even aligned to some of the newer activity. So we have to move investments and organizational pieces around to get there. Now, what happens is, had I not shown up, not me, but had a person like me, a change agent, not shown up, you would see a typical dysfunction at some level, whether it's a 1 or a 10. In this case, it was about a 9. They would have been failing at the next board meeting significantly. So when I can show that kind of value to the whole executive team, including the CEO, that gets me invited back to do other things. But that is a typical interaction that I have.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? Because it's one of those things that, on the outside looking in, right? You don't necessarily always it's not the fancy stuff, right? It's not the stuff that it's not the, the glamorous, the tactics here and there, but it's the practical stuff that actually drives your business forward, right? And
that's exactly right.
At the end of the day, right, your business is a reflection of the people inside of it, right? And the alignment between the management team, between different folks. And as you're talking, you're going through those exercises, I'm coming to realization, even with my own company and the leaders that we have in the own company, like at moments when we haven't felt aligned, that's when the chaos comes, right? And to your point, you can have two different visions. And one of the things that we had been kind of implementing within our business to really start getting everyone aligned in that sense was like, okay, like, well, how does your job impact? Like, what are you doing that's impacting the business? Like, how do you think you're either what way do you generate revenue for us? I want you to give me an answer for that specifically, right? So everyone is not like, in that sense, and the answers we were getting were very surprising to the fact that they didn't know what they were doing that was driving. And I was like, okay, this is a problem, right? We have to make sure that everyone knows the job that they're doing is contributing, even if you're on the customer experience side, right? You're not like that is longer retention, right? You're going to have the longer a client stays with us, the more money you make, right? So people have to always think about in that sense. And I love that you break it down with what it takes to have a company make sure they're hitting their goals, right? The alignment's super big.
And by the way, you mentioned something so important. Most of what I do is realign to the fundamentals. Organizations have inertia, right? They exist for long periods of time. Habits are developed.
Yeah.
We just do it because we do it. Sometimes an outsider, again, doesn't have to be me, but an outside voice can say, hey, why are we doing that? What drives value?
Yeah.
For you mentioned revenue. Well, let me offer you this. In many organizations, revenue and profit drive value. And
Yeah.
those things are at odds. And that's a natural tension, right? Top line revenue versus profitability. Well, how do we reconcile that? Well, and there might be other metrics that drive value. EBITDA versus gross profit as a percentage or a raw dollar. I know these things sound minor, but they're not. What really are the value drivers in an enterprise, and how are we aligned to deliver those value drivers over what period of time? That's what folks like me hopefully can be helpful with.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, are you seeing any trends right now within the space from talking with different executives and, just being inside, very hands-on with these folks? Are there any trends that are kind of coming up that you're noticing within the market?
I am. So everyone's talking about artificial intelligence and AI. It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. I'm convinced not everybody, including me, totally understands what it is and what are the implications, but it's being baked in
Yeah.
existing software platforms to help what? Help what? The first step of help is productivity. And we all know whatever business you're in, whatever industry you're in here, we can increase productivity. We can typically increase efficiency and value for the customer. Good, great, awesome. Will it replace some jobs? Likely. But in the first phase that we're in now, I think folks like me and my clients are finding it helpful to generate productivity, quality, efficiency.
Yeah.
As it evolves, the fears that it sort of engenders are very real, right? Let's take the legal profession. You have 5 paralegals that cost X dollars. Now you have a specific generative AI tool, not only for legal, but specifically for this particular employment law sector. Now, do you need 5 paralegals, or do you need one who can run the software really, really efficiently? So these are very real fears and concerns, but a lot of executives I talk to are excited about the productivity and efficiency gains. And we are, in fact, worrying about what it's going to do societally to that fabric or that contract in our culture about how we engage with our work. Because why, Alessandro? Work is incredibly important for my ego and esteem.
Yeah.
You're replaced by a non-human entity. I'm a little fearful of how that's going to interact with the social contract and our general society as we move forward.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, man, because I think about this a lot, right? I think about this a lot. I say, what jobs will AI be able to replace? And obviously what things are, AI not, and as the advancements are happening pretty rapidly, right? There's that there's almost like a fear where it's like what exactly, like what's the regulate, like where do we draw the line in that sense, right? And I think that's a big point, even what's going to happen with regulation that's going to need to come in for that itself, right? Because AI is becoming increasingly more intelligent, and it's only going to evolve, right? We're at very, very early stages of what we're seeing.
Right.
Imagine in the next 4 to 5 years what we're going to see from an AI agent perspective, right? Autonomous AI agents that are able to do certain workflows within a business that can replace these lower level, admin, tasks or even assistants, right, in certain categories. So I think one of the biggest ways to get that job security is being able to evolve with the technology and becoming good at being able to use it, right?
And you said that right. So you've heard the term hybrid work, right? So I'm going to use the term hybrid differently now. Think about a surgeon who uses a robotic feature to do a very precise surgery. So you're right. As AI evolves in many fields, will we be able to integrate the human effort with the technology in some sort of virtual setting? I think yes. I think it's a way to engage humans and technology together, and I call that more of a hybrid. How about this one? How about on the downside? Quantum computing is going to be the thing we're blabbing about next year, just like AI this year. Quantum computing is coming. Now, when quantum computing gets here, Alessandro, you're going to have the ability to unencrypt data. The privacy laws, the password protection, the firewalls of natural digital computing will be threatened and challenged. How do you layer that onto AI? In other words, I'm not a technical expert, but I'm paid to look at future trends and understand strategies. Many of my clients are technical. So I understand this at a cursory level, but I'm telling you right now, we're all enamored with AI. I wonder how quantum computing is going to intersect with AI as we move forward. Specifically, I wonder about global security, cybersecurity, and how where
Yeah.
the there. It's
Yeah. It's a great point. And it's one of those things where like we're living in such a crazy time right now to
crazy.
see these types of technologies that are evolving. I mean, I think, one of the biggest, evolutions of technology was obviously like the dot-com era, right? And being able to, the evolution of the internet. But I think the AI and, quantum computing, to your point, I think this is even bigger than the internet, right? This is like this is
Yeah,
a massive,
right.
it's going to massively change the way that we interact as a society. And I don't think, obviously you and I were on the forefront. We're seeing it, seeing kind of it be used. I'm not super technical in that sense either. And so I never claimed to be, but I can see the impact it's going to have on businesses. And it just makes so much sense as a business owner as to why you'd want to leverage AI and
Yeah.
code for profitability sense, right? But I did want to ask you this, right? Because we have the society now that's moving towards this AI, right? And moving towards, technology and, quantum computing, everything that you're mentioning. I have a theory here as well, right? That as we continue to move more and more towards this, technology base, like the human interaction and relationships are going to become more and more valuable. And I know we were talking
Yes.
about this off camera, but how important do you feel like those relationships, right, that you continue to, have within a business and, either with clients or with potential clients, how important are those relations going to be in the next, 3 to 4 to 5 years?
And how will those relationships have evolved or not?
Mm,
So I study human behavior, leadership development, business development, strategy development, whatever.
yeah.
So one of the things that I've learned is that credibility and trust will not go anywhere.
Yeah.
In other words, if that's the foundation of a business relationship, of a productive relationship outside of business,
Yeah.
if you're credible and you're trustworthy, you will have a connection to other businesses, to your industry, to your market, to individual executive leaders. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. Give you an example. One of the ways my firm generates revenue is through relationships with the individual. Now think about this for a moment. I can't knock on the door of Qualcomm or JP Morgan and say, hey, I'm pretty good. Would you like to talk to me? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
But when an individual leader with whom I've built trust and credibility in organization A, then in 5 years moves to organization B, and we keep our relationship based on trust and credibility in a two-way direction, all of a sudden I don't have to have a relationship with organization B. I have a relationship with Sally. And that
Yeah.
relationship with Sally is portable, it's permanent, and it
Yeah.
will not erode. I mean, of course, personal relationships can erode, put that aside. But as long as the credibility and the trust are there, we will have the connection that is human that will allow us to solve problems, engage with technology, get over hurdles. So the human relationship and connection will become as important, if not more important, as we move to the future, but it won't become less important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's one of the things that I mean, for lower ticket items, for like if you're selling peanuts or if you're selling like, lower ticket cost items, I think like a sales AI agent probably will be able to, replace that at some point, right? For lower ticket. But as for the higher ticket, for for longer, for relationship based sales, I don't think AI will ever be able to replace the element of relationship that you can build with someone, simply because of the fact that I don't think people will trust AI in that sense. I don't think we're going to have the inherent trust that we have with another human. I could be wrong, but that's my take.
I don't know if you're wrong. I don't know if you're wrong, except I'd like to add a generational component to what you said. We're not disagreeing, we're discussing. Watch this. A 26-year-old walking through CES in Las Vegas, CES conference. The old days, I'm 55. I would walk up to the booth at a conference, meet the people, take the tchotchke, have a 30-second conversation, take their business card if I wanted to follow up. Yeah? Yeah, that's how we did it.
Yeah.
What's happening in the digital native environment, I say digital native, I mean children who are now young adults who are in the workforce who really never really wrote on paper. They're just digital natives.
Yeah.
They don't need to go to the booth. They can scan the code, keep walking. If they're interested, engage with the technology. I think those folks in the next generation, maybe those folks plus the next generation, may in fact develop a trust if AI moves in the right direction, Alessandro. Now, let's pretend that AI goes off the tracks and creates great harm to the human race, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're right. So we don't know, but I will say this. Digital natives trust digital marketing and selling a lot more than I do. That's what I'll say, or my generation does.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's the thing is, why I feel that AI will be hard to trust is because of the biases that AI still does have, right? There is biases that depending on who created the code, right? So, and I think that in that sense, like even if you use ChatGPT, right, you can kind of tell that ChatGPT has some biases around some things, right? Depending on what you're researching. I don't know if
already ChatGPT's been around a couple of years already. People can know, oh, that's ChatGPT.
Yeah. So
right.
there's that element of it, but who knows, right? You bring up a really good point into our generation, right? Like, the millennials and Gen Z, like what their attitude towards technology is completely different than the baby boomers or the boomer generation, right? Like they have a different view of it. So potentially we would be more trusting of the technology that comes up. Like, right. That's a good point.
Let me make a note on bias. This is a very important point. I actually did a TEDx talk on bias, and I'm happy to talk about it. I'm proud of it. But put myself aside for a minute. You're right. When the AI goes and pulls the information, where's it pulling from, right?
Yeah.
Where's it pulling from? And by the source of pull comes bias. So yes, even though it's artificial intelligence and we think it's objective and clean and exists in its own environment, no, it comes from the collective of the human knowledge and experience that exists digitally. So you're absolutely right to bring up bias. It's a very important point. When we get this information, it's to validate an idea or to start an idea, but it ought not be the finished product at this point in the evolution of AI.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a rabbit hole that I can continue to go down to, but I'm sure that you're just as passionate as I am on this itself. So I'm just going to pull us up just a second and go back to, kind of what you're doing, with Brainerd Strategy. Like, we were talking a little bit like about the different aspects that you guys have and, what you've been able to carve out in terms of this, very specific, niche offering that you guys have in the value prop. What is like your guys's, vision that you're going to be continuing to do like in the next, 12, 24 months? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Two primary sources of value that will continue to drive, and watch this. As much as I work with clients and I'm interested in trends and technology, and I believe that our value proposition actually increases in its current offering. Now, strategically, I could be wrong. I could be Kodak and you could laugh at me in 10 years. But the development of leaders specifically to engage in a new world with new generations of employees, as long as we can be smart about the generational differences and the technology implications of the workforce, as long as we can stay on top of that, our core value proposition of developing leaders in a more complex world to lead in is going to be mission critical. Organizational design as hybrid impacts the workforce. Hybrid meaning part-time in the office, part-time out of office. Global workforce, engineering team in India, taking a handoff from engineering team in Tel Aviv, keep working 24 hours a day. Organizational design and alignment will be a major challenge. Most executive teams think they can move these things around like they're playing checkers. The way we think about org design is playing chess. It's getting toward the 3-year growth plan, not today's world. Anyway, not to go on that, but the org design and the leadership, and I'll say leadership and team development will become more important. Now, if we do it like we did it yesteryear, we'll fail. We have to stay on top of how workers and leaders are interacting, how leaders are interacting with the market, with the industry, with technology. If we can keep that in mind, we'll keep our value proposition.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you have to, it's always like you always have to stay ahead, right? You always have to, you make sure that you're innovating and you're coming up with new things, right? I think as a business, it's a war, right? There's a competitiveness to it, right? And if you're not innovating, your competition is, right? In that sense. And so
our analogy is, like I just said, we have to innovate within our core. I'll give you an example. I was a college wrestler and I'm a big fan of college wrestling. And one of the guys on Penn State, who's really a great wrestler, said the other day on TV, he said, all these things that I got away with in high school, I had to relearn wrestling in college. I had to
Mm,
relearn. And the guy in an interview said, "What'd you relearn?" He said, "I had to go back to the fundamentals."
mm.
I had all this fancy stuff, all this fancy stuff. I was able to express myself in high school as a wrestler this way. I come to college and boom, I got to go right back to the 4 fundamental moves that I can do. And I
Yeah.
had to re-engage with fundamentals. But he's re-engaging at a different level with a different level of sophistication. That's how I feel like our business has to move.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your take on this, right? I always love, asking people if they had to go back, right? Because obviously you've had a career now, you've learned so much, and you've seen so many different scenarios, so much different experience. If you had to go back to your younger self, right, and be able to give yourself some advice, maybe early on before you even maybe started your company, what advice would you tell yourself?
You know, I can be a little bit on the edges, sort of behaviorally with ideas, and playing the edge sometime with ideas and my own approach causes you to go over the line sometimes. And so I would have told myself, take a little bit more of a conservative approach to ideas being vetted more thoroughly before being put on the track for a year and wasting a year of momentum. For my own approach being a little bit too edgy at times with clients or employees and having to pull back. So I would have calmed down a little bit and played a little bit more conservative. The fact that I've been able at the age of 55 to continue to learn has been a key to my growth and development. I've always been kind of proud of that, but I've been a risk taker to the extent that it's hurt some people, it's hurt myself at times. I would like a redo on some of that. Not a huge redo, but yeah, I think there was some maturation I could have picked up early, to be frank with
Yeah, yeah, and it's hindsight's 2020, right? In all cases, right?
you. Yes.
But I would. There's also the counter argument to the risk taking gets you to where you are today, right? It gets you to the ability to continue to build something, right? And so, I mean, we'll end here, man. It's been a phenomenal conversation.
Thank
Love
you.
talking a little bit about what you guys are doing, kind of the vision that you guys have for Brainerd Strategy, and really how you got into the space. I'm a big fan of what you guys are building. I've always loved talking about like niche specific offerings that you find a little way to find a market for it, and obviously to the likes of enterprise organizations that are engaging with you, definitely doing something right in that sense,
Yeah.
right? So if people are listening to this, man, and they're wanting to reach out to you, they want to know how can I get in contact with you, what are the best ways to go ahead and do that?
I would say 2 things. BrainerdStrategy.com. That's our website. You can always contact us and me through there. We have content up there, different podcasts, different videos, different papers, and the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is interesting because it's all there. Our papers, our talks, our webinars. Particularly proud during COVID. We didn't, we slowed down like many businesses, not all, but we slowed down, and we were able to provide monthly webinars on very important, we saw topics for business and society. Pretty proud of that. All that stuff's on our YouTube channel, which is Brainerd Strategy. So if you want a sample of kind of see us in action, that's where you go.
Perfect. I'll make sure to include all those links in the description for people to go check out. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. If you guys did make it all the way to the end, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and go check out Michael and the team and what they're doing over at Brainerd. Thanks again, man. Hope you guys have a great,
Alessandro, thank you for having me. It's been a delight. Thank you.
of course. Ciao, ciao.